G'day virtual parts, it's Requiem. Today we're going to have a look at a virtual reality headset called the Pimax Crystal. This unit is on loan to me by Pimax for the purpose of reviewing it for you, so I'm going to give you my honest thoughts on it and what it's been like using it. For reference, I've used the Pimax Crystal on my current computer and this has the following specs. My other VR experiences I can compare to are with the HP Reverb G2 that I own and a friend's Vio Aero that I've used previously. I have used my Reverb G2 occasionally, but I couldn't really make the jump using it exclusively over track IR in my simulators because the overall clarity and field of view just wasn't good enough for me, especially in multiplayer. For the packaging, there's nothing out of the ordinary here. Everything was packed really securely. The headset has the standard faceplate with 4 cameras on it, and it came with 2 controllers plus a few other components. These include the 2 rechargeable batteries with a charging dock, extra facial foam, a USB hub, power supply, screwdriver with some screws and a lens cloth, plus the required USB-C and DisplayPort cables. Ensure you follow the instructions from Pimax exactly in terms of how to connect the crystal to your computer to make sure you get it done right the first time. You'll likely encounter a disconnect 10,500 error unless you restart your PC first before attempting to use the headset after everything is connected and installed. The Pimax software installed no problem, and there are quite a few settings you can adjust depending on how fast your system is. Under the device settings, you can set the refresh rate of the screens to 120, 90 or 72 Hz. Ideally, you'll match the refresh rate closest to your best FPS, and this will help keep your experience smooth. Eye tracking is an excellent feature which we'll get into a little bit later, but this is something you should always keep checked. The auto IPD adjustment is very useful, but occasionally the visual prompt remained on when I took the headset on and off during a sim session. So if you know your IPD, just set it manually and this will avoid the problem. However, if multiple people are using your headset, then you should probably leave this setting on. The headset wearing location reminder is also helpful initially, but after some time using the crystal, I've ended up just leaving it unchecked. Under these game settings, you can customize these per game. So I'll usually set the render quality to 1 and then adjust the render resolution within SteamVR or the game itself, and dynamic foveator rendering to balanced or off if the game doesn't support it. Under general, this is where you want to update the headset's firmware. Under advanced, this is when you can adjust any lens settings if you want to do that, as well as the local dimming level and the video pass-through feature. Getting the OpenXR plugin and toolkit along with OpenComposite are both a must in order to get the best performance for the Pimax compared to utilizing SteamVR alone. There are programs that will require SteamVR though, and in this case, Pimax VR should be the selected runtime within it. Getting all of this set up and the performance tweaked appropriately took me a few weeks, just due to my real life flying getting in the way, so trying to get everything right was a little frustrating for me doing it in spurts. Now I have it all in a good spot though, so I can just keep going without any major issues. Initially though, I was only able to use the headset immediately after a fresh restart of my computer, because if I turned the crystal off while my computer was running, I couldn't get it to reconnect after turning the crystal back on, which was annoying. So what I found to get it working reliably is this. I'll turn the headset on before turning on or restarting my computer. So this means that the power light on the Pimax should be blue. Number 2, if my PC is already on, then I need to unplug the USB cable from the port next to the power port on the USB hub. Doing this forces the headset to be recognized, and this is the fastest way, but you'll need your hub in an easily accessible position in order to do this. You know when the crystal is ready for use because then the power light will turn green. Video pass-through is the new feature, and it does work in SteamVR, and the picture itself is like a fuzzy black and white TV show, but it's good enough to clearly know your surroundings. I had no issues finding keys I wanted, but when launching DCS L2, it stopped working. This could change in future updates though, and I found that it also could activate on its own if I alt-tabbed in DCS and I couldn't turn it off even after closing it. I needed to fully restart the crystal in order to fix this problem, So I disabled the shortcut for video pass-through for now until that feature becomes more reliable. The default strap isn't that great. It does help alleviate the pressure of the weight somewhat, but from what I've heard, the newer top strap from Pimax is much better at helping with this issue. Compared to what I was used to with the Reverb G2 at 550 grams, the Crystal is definitely on the heavy side at 845 grams, or 1.9 pounds in American. Over time though, I have adjusted to the weight and I don't really notice it anymore, to be honest, provided I get the fit right. I'm comfortable flying a little over 2 hours with the headset on, and after that I need a break. So I can see that for more extended play sessions, or simply for other people's preference, this weight could definitely be an issue for you. Part of getting the right fit is adjusting the tightness knob on the back behind the battery. You don't want to necessarily twist the knob for too much tightness, because I found that my skin would touch the lenses and smear them a little bit. So now once I feel a little pressure on my forehead, I stop tightening it and it'll hold on my head pretty well. I also found that during my extended sim sessions, the heat generated will cause sweat coming off my forehead to collect around my nose, especially if there's a lot of dogfighting going on where I'm twisting and turning a lot. So I always try to keep my play time to around 2 hours for comfort. The QLED plus mini LED screens are at a resolution of 2880 x 2880 per eye, with 35 pixels per degree for the Crystal, with refresh rates of 72, 90 or 120 Hz. Compared to the 2160 resolution with 23 pixels per degree in the Reverb G2, the extra clarity of these screens in the Crystal was immediately apparent to me, and it reminded me of my experience with a friend's Vaio Aero headset. The best way I can describe how it looks is that I have the impression as if I'm looking at my monitor when I'm wearing the headset. It's simply that nice to look at. These screens also include local dimming, which basically gives the screens the capability of adjusting the brightness differently across multiple areas on the screen. And this will help you when you have a scene which has both bright and dark elements, which need to stay both bright and dark respectively. Now I said these screens are already pretty clear, but I also added the Ulma Lens plugin, and this helps sharpen the picture even more, especially in DCS. So that is a great extra addition if you want to have an even better picture. But unfortunately, the license for it is on a time limit. It's still a great addition though, so if you want to try it out, you can find it here. The field of view for the Crystal with the standard lenses is 125 degrees horizontally and 140 degrees diagonally. This is compared to the G2s of 114 degrees horizontal. This extra field of view is pretty good, but personally I would definitely prefer a wider field of view to increase the immersion a bit more. These lenses are interchangeable, and there's going to be lenses coming out that will have a wider field of view compared to what we have right now. This will be released at some point, so this is something to look for in the future. Combining the extra clarity that comes with these screens and the extra field of view makes checking the 6 o'clock region in the Crystal much easier than it was in a Reverb G2 for me. This is one of the biggest reasons why I stopped using the G2, because of that extra difficulty. With the extra twisting that I needed to do in the G2, I was concerned about straining myself too much and possibly causing a little bit of a neck injury. The twisting and turning while looking around will likely cause the cable to twist and distract you with the added tension. The cable does have kind of a guide and holder that you can use at the back of the headset, but I still found myself feeling the cable's resistance pulling against me when I would look to the right. This has probably been the most irritating part of using VR consistently for me. The headset can be used in a mode not requiring the cable for certain games, but for the simulators I fly, I've needed to keep it tethered to my PC, so I haven't been able to use the headset without the cable connected. There are 4 cameras on the exterior of the Crystal, so no base stations are required, which is great if space is limited. The tracking is pretty good for the most part. I have had instances where my tracking would snap around or not register correctly, but that was usually occurring when there's brighter light in the room. One note about tracking performance is that if my monitor is on with a high brightness, it can actually affect the tracking accuracy. The eye tracking is excellent once you have it calibrated. Sometimes though, after restarting the Crystal, the eye tracking didn't get picked up and I needed to reboot my PC to get it working again. DFR is dynamic foveated rendering. In a nutshell, DFR works by utilising the eye tracking in the Crystal to know exactly where you're looking at the screen. So in the areas where you are looking, the picture is going to be sharp, but in the peripheral areas you're not looking at, it's not going to be rendered as sharp. In programs which allow this, DFR will improve your VR frame rate because it's not rendering a sharp image all over the screen, but only where it needs to be rendered based on where you're looking. And the switch happens so fast you don't even notice it when you're looking around. Not every program is compatible with DFR though. If I left the DFR setting on, it was causing pixelation at the edges of my screen while flying in L2. So if you happen to experience graphical issues in specific programs, then try turning DFR off first. The performance from these sims was pretty good on my RTX 3070. In Steam VR, for example, in L2, I was getting 45 to 50 FPS, but this needed motion smoothing on in order to keep the viewpoint smooth as I was looking around and flying. But once I switched to the 4070 Ti Super, I could easily hold over 70 FPS, and using the 72 Hz refresh rate with the motion smoothing off made flying in L2 a great experience. When testing in DCS, I found that my PC is CPU bound, so in my current settings, I don't really get more than about 75 FPS with DFR on or off, but I'll still run the headset at 72 Hz with DFR on just in case I need the extra performance. The performance in Microsoft Flight Simulator was acceptable, but it wasn't that great for me, even after switching to the 4070 Ti Super. After using some VR guides to improve performance, I could get around 45 FPS in the PMDG 737 instead in a large city like Boston. So I think I'd need to change my CPU to get the biggest benefit here. The controllers I did use a little bit in Phasmophobia and Beat Saber, and I like that the controllers are USB rechargeable and that they don't need batteries. They track just fine in games like these that use them. I had no issues using it at all. For the audio, my Crystal didn't come with the extra add-on earphones. I'm not much of an audiophile, but to me the standard audio was just fine and it has plenty of volume available, and this can be controlled on the headset behind the power button. A single rechargeable battery sits in the back of the headset, and it can be a little tricky to get out, but with a bit of practice you get used to the pressure needed and it's not too bad. During my whole time testing the Crystal though, I never had to change the battery out while playing because it remained tethered to my PC. If you do need to change the batteries mid-game though, you can do that because there is a small amount of battery power in the Crystal that will last long enough for you to swap the batteries out. The biggest issue with the headset is simply how expensive it is, making it out of reach for a lot of people, including myself, because without direct experience of it, I don't think I could have pulled the trigger on purchasing it. Having been able to experience the Crystal firsthand though, has made me more of a VR convert going forward. As a real life pilot, it's hard to ignore how much my vision is so much more restricted wearing VR compared to the real thing, but the Crystal is definitely on the way to getting closer as I see it, replacing track IR for me when I'm not creating tutorial content. The Crystal is definitely a VR enthusiast headset because it's providing such great clarity and an overall experience, and the price really reflects that. But you also need the GPU to power it. The minimum GPU for a Crystal is the NVIDIA 2070, but you're going to need higher than that to run a decent simulator with acceptable visuals and FPS. The second issue is that it can be difficult to set up and tweak initially. It's taken me a long time to get the Crystal and the simulators I fly with running to the point where I'm happy with it. There's been many hours of me taking the headset on and off, tweaking various settings in the Pimax software, simulator graphics, OpenXR settings, etc. that make using the Crystal hard to begin with, especially if you're a new VR user. Outside of simply enjoying flying around in the various simulators, I found VR to be especially useful in the realm of real-life flight training, and this is a huge plus for me personally. Using the concept of chair flying, I can quote, sit in the cockpit of an airplane I'm going to learn, and I can practice my flows moving around the cockpit. I actually did this before I started my initial 737 training at my airline, and it really helped me build up my spatial awareness of exactly where the controls were and how far I needed to reach for them before entering the actual real-life simulator. This spatial awareness is something you simply couldn't get in the same way by looking at it on a monitor or wallpaper. Utilizing VR in this way is an extra thing I'll be doing personally moving forward before I go to do my yearly training or as part of training in a new airplane. With everything we've looked at today in mind, if you have the computer to run it and can afford it, I would definitely recommend the Crystal for VR, especially if you are heavily into flight simulators or even racing simulators. The clarity you experience in the Crystal is amazing, and this comes in handy for flight simulators because being able to read the fine details on gauges and displays, as well as spotting distant targets, are both important, and the Crystal lets you do this without eye strain. Combining the clarity with the extra field of view that makes checking 6 easier is what pushes me towards using more VR than track AR now. So if you're really into VR and want to make that step up in your experience, I would recommend the Crystal. I hope this review has helped inform you a little more about the Crystal, and I do plan on streaming some VR sessions in the future, which you can find on my Twitch channel. So until next time, remember to fly safe and check 6.